Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
In a seismic blow to global terrorism, the United States announced the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The elusive founder of ISIS orchestrated a reign of terror that shocked the world with its brutality. Leading the self-proclaimed Islamic State, he masterminded atrocities across Iraq, Syria, and beyond, inspiring lone wolf attacks globally. ISIS, under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's ruthless leadership, carved out a terrifying influence, controlling vast swathes of Iraq and Syria by 2014, including major cities like Mosul and Raqqa. Its grip extended beyond territory, wielding a sophisticated propaganda machine that radicalized thousands worldwide through chilling online videos and social media. Baghdadi's bold declaration of a caliphate in 2014 not only galvanized followers but also ignited a bitter rivalry with al-Qaeda, fracturing the global jihadist movement. ISIS came from al-Qaeda in Iraq, and under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, it became more violent. In 2013, ISIS wanted to control jihad in Syria, which led to fighting with al-Qaeda's branch, Jabhat al-Nusra. Baghdadi declared a caliphate and refused to follow al-Qaeda's orders, causing a split. Al-Qaeda said ISIS was too brutal and that it could turn people away. Al-Qaeda was very unhappy with Zarqawi because he was killing a lot of Muslims. He was engaging in brutally violent, excessive tactics, and he was killing a lot of Shiites. They considered many of his actions to be unproductive, but they didn't stop him. Baghdadi today is the heir of that tradition. He is the heir of that approach, which is completely different from al-Qaeda Central in terms of tactics and strategy. This split made both groups weaker but made ISIS more famous. On a tense morning in Libya's volatile landscape, ISIS militants launched a brazen attack on a checkpoint near Misrata, a strategic coastal city, leaving 3 Misrata militiamen dead and the region on edge. This assault, reported in early 2016, underscored the persistent threat of ISIS in North Africa, even as its territorial grip weakened elsewhere. Libyan sources estimate up to 2,000 ISIS fighters were active in the region at the time, exploiting Libya's post-Gaddafi chaos to establish a foothold. The checkpoint, manned by Misrata's battle-hardened militias, was a critical line of defense against ISIS's expansion toward oil-rich areas and coastal strongholds like Sirte, which the group briefly controlled. The attack unfolded with chilling precision. ISIS fighters, likely trained in guerrilla tactics, struck under cover of darkness, using small arms and possibly improvised explosives to overwhelm the outpost. The 3 fallen militiamen, part of Misrata's formidable anti-ISIS coalition, were hailed as heroes, their sacrifice galvanizing local resolve. This incident highlighted ISIS's shift from territorial control to hit-and-run warfare, a tactic born of necessity, as international airstrikes and ground offensives eroded its so-called caliphate in Iraq and Syria. In Libya, the group capitalized on fractured governance, tribal divisions, and porous borders to smuggle fighters and weapons, creating a dangerous hub just across the Mediterranean from Europe. The reported presence of 2,000 ISIS militants in Libya at the time alarmed regional and Western powers. These fighters, a mix of local recruits, foreign jihadists, and defectors from other factions, were entrenched in training camps and urban hideouts, particularly around Sirte. Their numbers, though estimates varied, signaled Libya's emergence as a fallback for ISIS after losses in the Middle East. The group's propaganda boasted of Libya as a new frontier, aiming to destabilize the region and disrupt oil exports, a lifeline for Libya's economy. Misrata's militias, backed by international support, responded with fierce counteroffensives, eventually recapturing Sirte by late 2016, but not without heavy casualties. This checkpoint attack was more than a skirmish. It was a stark reminder of ISIS's adaptability and enduring menace. It exposed the challenges of securing Libya's vast desert expanses and the need for unified action against a fragmented but resilient enemy. In a relentless global campaign to crush ISIS, world powers unleashed devastating airstrikes on the terrorist group's strongholds in Syria, each driven by vengeance and strategy. Russia, enraged by ISIS's 2015 claim of bombing a Russian passenger plane over Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, killing 224 people, launched a ferocious air campaign targeting ISIS positions in Syria. Moscow's warplanes pounded command centers and supply lines, signaling a brutal escalation. Meanwhile, France, reeling from the horrific 2015 Paris attacks that claimed 130 lives, struck back with precision airstrikes on Raqqa, ISIS's self-proclaimed capital, hitting training camps and weapon depots. The United States, a key player in the coalition, intensified its combat missions, releasing gripping footage of airstrikes obliterating ISIS fuel tankers, crucial to the group's illicit oil trade. These coordinated strikes crippled ISIS's infrastructure, disrupted its finances, and sent a clear message: the world's resolve against terror was unyielding. The mission in Syria to dismantle ISIS was a complex, high-stakes campaign blending air power, artillery, and ground operations to reclaim territory and crush a fanatical enemy. At its heart was the battle for Raqqa, ISIS's de facto capital, where coalition forces, led by the United States, supported Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, with relentless firepower. Airstrikes rained down on Raqqa, targeting ISIS strongholds with pinpoint accuracy, while artillery units unleashed a barrage of missiles to pulverize defensive positions, bunkers, tunnels, and sniper nests built to defy assault. These barrages were often indiscriminate, leveling entire areas to weaken ISIS's grip, though at a heavy cost to civilian infrastructure. The coalition's strategy relied on overwhelming force, US-led airstrikes, supplemented by French and British jets, coordinated with SDF ground advances to encircle and isolate ISIS fighters. Artillery, including HIMARS rocket systems, delivered devastating strikes, obliterating fortified positions and supply caches. This grueling campaign, peaking in 2016 to 2017, faced fierce resistance from ISIS, who used human shields and booby traps to slow the advance. Yet, the mission's success in liberating Raqqa by October 2017 dealt a crushing blow to ISIS's territorial ambitions. Though the scars of war left the city in ruins, and the ideological threat far from extinguished. In a bold display of military might, Russia unleashed a barrage of 26 cruise missiles in October 2015, striking 11 ISIS targets deep in Syria's war-torn landscape. Launched from warships in the Caspian Sea, over 1,500 kilometers away, these precision-guided missiles obliterated ISIS command posts, weapon depots, and training camps, showcasing Russia's long-range firepower. The Russian Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, declared the strikes surgically precise, insisting no civilian infrastructure was harmed, a claim met with skepticism amid Syria's chaotic battleground. This operation, sparked by ISIS's downing of a Russian passenger plane, marked Moscow's aggressive entry into the anti-ISIS campaign, bolstering its ally, the Assad regime, while sending a chilling message to terrorists and rivals alike. He looks older, but contrary to reports, he is not sick. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi wants to show the world not only that he's alive, but also that he is still fighting what he calls the Crusaders. It's not clear whether he is in Syria, Iraq, or elsewhere. But Sri Lanka and other attacks reveal what he later threatened: that the battle would not be confined to any geographical area. He will look for countries with weak intelligence agencies and continue to target innocent people for as long as he remains at large.
we've been in Syria for a long time, and it was supposed to be a very short hit, and a hit on ISIS, but it didn't work out that way. They never left, and they've been there for many, many years. And we were down to very few soldiers in Syria. We had 50 in the region that you're talking about, 50 soldiers, and they've been already moved. And they say, well, maybe we could stay longer. I say, well, when do we get out? There's got to be a time we get out. We have to bring our people back home. And frankly, surveillance for a couple of weeks. We knew a little bit about where he was going, where he was heading. We had very good information that he was going to another location. He didn't go. 2 or 3 efforts were canceled because he decided to change his mind, constantly changing his mind. And finally, we saw that he was here, held up here. We knew something about the compound. We knew it had tunnels. The tunnels were dead end for the most part. There was one we think that wasn't, but we had that covered too, just in case. The level of intelligence, the level of work was pretty amazing. We really had great cooperation. And you have to understand, they didn't know what we were doing and where we were going exactly. But the ISIS fighters are hated as much by Russia and some of these other countries as they are by us. They gave us not a military role at all, but they gave us some information that turned out to be helpful. Turkey, we dealt with them. They know we were going in. We flew over some territory. They were terrific, no problem. They were not problem. You know, they could start shooting, and then we will take them out, but a lot of bad things can happen. Plus, it was a very secret mission. We flew very, very low and very, very fast. I got to watch it along with General Milley, Vice President Pence, others in the Situation Room, and we watched it so clearly.
So how did you watch this?
Well, I don't want to say how, but we had absolutely perfect, as though you were watching a movie. It was that in it, the technology there alone is really great.
The reason why you use soft operators is because of their ability and skill set, which allows them to discriminate. You don't need daylight to do it. If you prefer the night, we own it. asked him to surrender himself, he refused. He went down into a subterranean area, and in the process of trying to get him out, he detonated a suicide vest, we believe, and killed himself.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. The United States has been searching for Baghdadi for many years. Capturing or killing Baghdadi has been the top national security priority of my administration. U.S. Special Operations Forces executed a dangerous and daring nighttime raid in northwestern Syria and accomplished their mission in grand style.